to wear a baseball shirt.
Today we're going to hear from Jason Cooper talking about the West River Trail. And I have to give a plug for the library. We have 2 copies on the shelf as of yesterday of 36 Miles of Trouble. So if you're interested in learning about the West River Railroad, which was along what is now the West River Trail, and I can verify that because helping to clean up, we found, I don't know how many railroad ties buried in the mud. So transportation at one point was a railroad. Transportation moved to highways. Transportation may be moving again in this generation. So we'll hear today about the West River Trail, a little bit of the history, I think, and a little bit about what's being done now in terms of making it a new form of transportation in the area. So, Jason Cooper, the Friends of the West River Trail.
So, how many of the people here have actually been out on the trail so far? Sounds like half, maybe more. So, let me start by telling you a little bit about the history of the West River Trail. It started back in, I guess, the late 1860s when the community decided they really wanted to put in a railroad which would be able to move people up the West River. It took, at that time, probably 2 or 3 days to be able to travel by road up to the South Londonderry area. Once the railroad was built that far, it turned that into a trip much of the time of just 2 or 3 hours, of course. The railroad got the name 36 Miles of Trouble for a reason. They had so many problems with hillsides caving in, snowfall, bridges washing out, rails washing out, and eventually in 1936 the railroad went bankrupt. They abandoned the property and signed it over to the state. The piece that we were recently able to acquire was the piece of the railroad that went from West Dummerston, right beside the river, starting at the quarry and coming down into, it actually comes down to the mouth of the West River. The state, after the railroad was signed back to them, transferred that piece over to the quarry because the quarry still wanted to handle their stone by shipping it out by rail. But 2 years later, in that great hurricane of 1938, the bridge over the mouth of the West River washed out, and the quarry people said, "We're not in the business of building bridges, we quit." And they transferred their piece over to a salvage company that tore up all the roads, all the rails, the bridges, took all the rolling stock, and back in 1938 that was being used for the war effort, so who knows where that went. But meanwhile, leaving behind this interesting, nice little piece of land, which since 1938 has been used informally by people who know the community as a hiking trail, place to travel out along the river, way to access the river to go swimming. And finally, last year, well, actually I should back up a little bit, which is about a little over 15 years ago, a group formed for the purpose of turning the West River Railroad into a community access space, a trail for hiking and biking, skiing. And they actually had a fair amount of success at the northern end. So from South Londonderry coming south, there is now an 18-mile length of trail that comes all the way down to the Townsend Dam. Comes down through Jamaica State Park, and it's a beautiful trail. However, the piece down here never quite got very far until about a year ago, when we managed to track down that salvage company that still owned that property. And they were very generous and made it available to us. And so now we have this 6-mile stretch of trail, which is right here in our community. And we have been working on it. We've had several work trips. We've had a lot of volunteers come out to help us clear some of the rocks that have come down the hills, take out some of the trees that were across the trail, clear the brush, reroute some of the mud, put in some drainage, and it's been very rewarding to be out there the last couple of work trips and be out there for about 3 hours at a time and see 30 or maybe 50 people go by that are using this trail already. So people are getting out there and being able to enjoy this wonderful path that travels along the West River. So we are working right now to constantly make this more accessible and to publicize it and to also expand it. Right now, the way you can access the southern end is you come in past the Marina restaurant and you continue just a little bit upstream. And the road will end there at a parking lot, and you will see a sign that says that you are at the beginning of the West River Trail. And you can start there, and it will travel up underneath the interstate and just snake along the West River in this beautiful shaded riverside trail. And that will continue up, let's see, from the parking lot where you start, it'll be about 3.5 miles right now. And will end currently on Rice Farm Road. We are looking at expanding that a little bit farther, hopefully this year. There is a brook right there at the northern end that we need to put a bridge up over. And at that point, we'll be able to continue up to the Nature Conservancy parking lot and connect this trail into the trails that go up Black Mountain. So one of the things that's exciting me about this is not just this one little beautiful little trail that we have here, but as I've been working on this project, I've been realizing that there's all kinds of little trails here and there. And now we're starting to bring them together, and we're starting to connect these trails. One of the projects we're working on right now is we are in negotiation with the railroad to be able to continue the southern end of our trail on down the bank of the Connecticut River, which would come down to where our newly redeveloped train station is. This would mean that not only are we going to have this beautiful green waterfront park in downtown Brattleboro, but hopefully very soon that will be a starting point where you can get on your bike or walk, ride up along the river, cross the West River, get into the next piece of the trail, go all the way up to Black Mountain, climb those trails if you want, and hopefully within a couple of years we're going to continue up as far as we have now, which would take people up to the quarry. And there is that beautiful swimming hole on the West River. So people would be able to get on their bike and ride up to this swimming hole that's about 5 or 6 miles up the road. This is an incredible thing that we have in our community. But that is just the beginning of what we have. Beyond that, we have the retreat trails, which are right across Route 30, which virtually tie into that. There is actually a trail around the southern end of the meadows that is not very well kept, but is travelable, which connect those two together. We're looking at the fact that about a mile south of downtown Brattleboro, there's an old railroad bridge that crosses the Connecticut River. People know that bridge?
Yeah.
Right now, the town of Brattleboro controls the property from that bridge up to Route 119 with one exception, which is the old, the Merrill gas plant that's there. When the state of New Hampshire finally does rebuild that bridge there, they will have to move that plant. The state will require that. At that point, we will have the ability to tie in down to that railroad bridge. Right now, today, starting at the New Hampshire side of that railroad bridge, there are 82 miles of trails that go down into Massachusetts, up through Keene, and out into New Hampshire. This is all right here at our door. And the idea that this is all starting to connect together, that you can get on your bike here and ride up to the quarry, maybe someday up to South Londonderry, or up to Keene or down into Massachusetts, and you don't even have to ride on a road. You're out on these beautiful trails that are traveling through the woods, that are safer, they're more pleasant. I'm very excited about the direction this community is going. I'm excited about the fact that this other network of transportation, as Bob referred to it, we now are going to be able to travel and not necessarily be subject to the cars and everything else that's out there. More pleasant, it's safer, it's healthier to be able to be riding and walking, cross-country skiing, whatever people want. So that's what we're doing, and that's where we're heading. One other project I wanted to mention that we're looking at is one of the things we're investigating is the Agency of Transportation in the state is planning to rebuild those large bridges over the West River. And when they do, unfortunately, they're going to close a portion of our trail while they do that work. We're discussing with them the idea that they should offer us an alternative, and we are negotiating with them to see if they can put a bridge, a footbridge, that would go from the West River Trail over the river to the new West River Park. So we don't know if that's going to come together, but we're very excited about the possibility. And this would be an incredible enhancement. And again, a connectivity. We're connecting the West River Trail to the park. Right across the Route 30 from the park are the retreat trails. Again, these all connect together. It means that people, already I'm seeing people commute on the West River Trail. People who are, rather than coming down Route 30, they're riding the trail to get down to Brattleboro. That's what I like to see. I want to see more of that. So that's what the West River Trail is about. I'm hoping that everyone will come out and enjoy it if you haven't, or continue to do if you have. That if you would like to donate $2, $200, whatever you can donate, this will go towards our making of better surfaces. We're putting up kiosks, hopefully supporting building that bridge. We're doing some rare plant identification. We're, again, trying to make this a better and better asset in the community. So we're looking for donations. We are looking for people who would like to come volunteer. If you'd like to come join us for one of our work parties, get on our email list. We have a website, which is westrivertrail.org. I have that right? Okay, good. So you can go and see what we have been doing. Get us your email address. We'll notify you next time we're going to have a work trip. And come and enjoy this wonderful new part of the community.
Carolina Alexu, to be on the Planning Commission also, but I'm just here as a citizen. I have a couple of questions for you based on what you said. I find it, first to comment, exciting that a visitor to Brattleboro coming on the train could, in the future, essentially get off the train when the train will allow bicycles again, and could then access those trails also. So I think that's really great, and the possibility of making that new waterfront park accessible to more is, in that way, is things we've actually talked about on the Planning Commission that are going to go in the town plan and things like that. So it's really exciting. In the beginning, you mentioned the upper portion of the trail that already exists from Londonderry down to Townsend. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there was any damage to the trail during Hurricane Irene up in the Jamaica portion of the trail, or any of that section of the trail. Would you know the answer to that?
I have not been on the trail since the hurricane, so I can't speak to that.
I can. Greg Uhlmans, who's on the Friends of West River Trail upper section board, just emailed that right from the Townsend Dam for a little ways north it's closed because of damage from Irene, but there was a lot of sand and silt and debris, and they cleaned most of it off, but it's still not quite open. So.
Thanks. And when you talked about be able to connect to the trails that go up Black Mountain from that place, does Black Mountain, or you or anybody know, does that already connect to the Pinnacle? I think Black Mountain's going to be the southern terminus of the Pinnacle trails that go up through into Putney and Westminster West in that way.
Yes, more connectivity. I don't believe that it connects right now, but I've talked to people who said they are actively working on trying to make that connection. They have most of it in place, agreements with landowners and so forth. So it's in progress, and again, heading that direction, and the idea of having another branch of that trail that goes all the way up through Brookline and so forth. It's very exciting.
And again, this is more of a general question. You may or may not know the answer from that rail bridge across the Connecticut, south of town. Do the trails on the other side of the river, you mentioned Keene and down into Massachusetts, does that connect partly to the there's a Sunapee to Monadnock kind of trail corridor that actually does go to Massachusetts also, and I wondered if you knew if this was part of that in any way?
Again, this is not something that I have actually been on. I have read about it in, I guess, the the county plan that was done. There was a back in, unfortunately, summer of 2001. There had been a very large study done that talked about this, and I've read that study. But that study was actually released and publicly presented about 2 weeks before 9/11 and just totally vanished as of that happening. So now it has resurfaced. We're trying to do constructive things with that. So all I read was that there are 82 miles of trails that spread out that way. If this goes to Keene, I would think that it would have to intersect with that trail, but I don't know that concretely. But that might be part of why it's 82 miles to be able to go all the way that far.
How will the trail be maintained over the long run? And however it is that anything like the major trails are maintained, like the Appalachian Trail?
I can only speak for our portion of the trail. So the Friends of the West River Trail would be responsible for their section of the trail. So, you know, the Pinnacle Association would probably be responsible for their piece. I don't know if it's the retreat that's responsible for their part or if there is another group that takes care of those. But it seems to be that it is a patchwork of organizations, each taking responsibility for their piece of the trail. I believe the trails in New Hampshire are under some sort of state program, so those may well be handled by an entity in the state.
A future piece that would go across the West River and down along the river down to, you know, near where the train station is. Just two questions. Would the crossing of the West River be actually on Putney Road itself? And the other question, what's the state of the sort of the trail itself along the river, or you know, what's it like right now?
Well, let's see. How do I answer that? Our vision is that the way you would cross the West River is on Putney Road. And my feeling is anytime you can avoid a trail having to cross a road, you're coming out ahead. And so what I've done is I've done a little crawling around under that Putney Road bridge. And it looks like it would be possible with very little effort to actually make sort of a cloverleaf thing where the trail gets up on the sidewalk, and as soon as it gets to the southern side, it actually curls around under and passes under that bridge. There actually is an old dirt road that then continues underneath the railroad bridge to the edge of the Connecticut River. So that would be the way it crosses the railroad as well. It just goes under, and then the trail itself down to Connecticut, as I envision it, for what that's worth, is we would have to build a new trail, but it would snake right along the river. I would want it against the water as close as the Agency of Natural Resources will allow us to be. I think it's much more pleasant. The old West River Railroad bed is actually just to the west side of the existing rail, which means if you were able to use that bed, and I don't think you can because it's too close to the active rail, but if you did, you'd be between an embankment on one side and rails on the other. It would not be as pleasant a trip. The other thing is once you get down to where the restaurant is, what is it now called, Whetstone Station? Mm-hmm. So the Whetstone Pub, that will, we've already talked to them, had initial discussions, and they are very open to our coming across their parking lot as part of the trail. They recognize that this might be very good business for them to have all this foot and bike traffic hot and thirsty coming through their parking lot. So they'll probably want to put in bike racks. And then it also means it's a natural connection as we go down the riverbank to be able to tie into that old railroad bridge, which is on that side anyway. But keeping the trail up along the water, I think, is a much more pleasant place, and that's my vision at this point. So we'll see how that goes.
First piece of this trail is really the first project that the Friends of the West River all are really undertaking is what Jason and all the volunteers have been working on, which is improving the surface of that trail so that it can be a better surface for families and individuals who have hybrids and not just mountain bikes. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, Jason, about the plans for improving that surface, what's the final surface? People talk about SurePack, it's not going to be paved, so what is the SurePack surface like, and what are the things that have to be done to that trail in order to make that ready to put a SurePack surface down?
SurePack is what they like to put down on dirt roads, driveways, things like that. It is it's a crushed stone of a kind, and once it gets wet and driven over, it still looks like a dirt road, but it is almost as hard as concrete. So what that means is it's a surface that is not very susceptible to kind of mud season distortion or potholes or washing out. And if you think of your nicest, smoothest country road, that's ideally what we're going to end up with, is that kind of nice, very smooth dirt road surface that will be very durable, but it doesn't look like you're in a highway out in the woods. We don't want it paved. We don't want it 8 feet wide. A lot of the trail is already in great shape. There are still places that there's some mud. There are still places that there's some roots and rocks. It is all rideable now, or walkable, and it is certainly far better than it had been. The last work trip, which I think was last weekend, we put in 5 or 6 drainage pipes under the trail to be able to dry out areas that were muddy. So we're largely ready in the preparation now to start putting down the SurePack. Putting down that SurePack takes a lot of labor and some equipment, which we are in the process of soliciting donations for. We've had some interest from Sir Sosimo to provide us with an amount of SurePack we don't know. We have to figure out how much we need and see how generous they're going to be, but it was wonderful that they had opened talks with us about possibly doing that. So again, the goal is to make it so that, I guess in my eyes, I want to see it so that any kid who's just learning to ride a bicycle would have a very easy time riding down that path. If that means that it would be easy enough, I don't know if it would quite be considered wheelchair accessible, but in reality it's probably pretty close, or will be then. So that would be my goal. I'd like it so that somebody who might be having difficulties walking, it's pretty level, would easily be able to take a stroll down that trail. We're looking at the possibility of putting in benches along the way so that if people need to stop and take a rest or take in the view or have lunch or whatever, that's an option out there. We're also talking about a couple of places where we might be able to put picnic tables where people can hike or bike out and sit down and have a picnic out there in the woods by the river, and just make it as user-friendly as we can. What we have found, or I shouldn't say what we have found, what I have come across is several articles that have been studies that have been done by the National Association of Realtors to determine the impact of things like trails on communities. And one of the things they found is that being close to trails like these tend to increase the property values in the average of 15 to 25%. So the values of the property are significantly greater. One of the last work trips we were out on the trail working, we saw this couple come down with 2 kids all on bikes, and they excitedly stopped saying, "Oh, we're so glad to see you working on the trail, this is great," and proceeded to tell us that they just bought a house up on Rice Farm Road because oh, that was you. Okay.
It wasn't us, but we also have a house on Rice Farm.
Okay. But this couple said they bought that house because they heard this trail was there, and that's what they were looking for. So already, case in point. The other thing is, some people fear that, again, it's the fear that, well, if you open it to the public, then undesirable people will come. The studies have shown the opposite to be true. If you look down by the railroad tracks now, you're going to find homeless people. You've heard some of the crime. There was somebody who was killed down there a couple of years ago because of that kind of activity. That kind of activity does not tend to stick around when the public is traveling those trails all the time. And there are more eyes, there are more people watching things, and so the crime rate around the trail networks according to the studies I've seen, goes down. So the properties are safer. A trail, as part of a system like this, tends to be maintained. So, for instance, one of the things we had to do when we started working on our piece of the trail is we had to go in there and haul out the trash from the parties that had been happening in there back when it was secluded and inaccessible, or openly accessible. We have put up chains at both ends of our section so that it keeps the vehicles out. We put up signs letting people know that vehicles are not permitted in there. We have worked with the Brattleboro Police Department. Their officers who have the bikes would be thrilled to go ride that trail as part of their work. So we have that happening. We have talked to the state police as well. We have provided keys to the locks of those gates to the fire department, to rescue, to the state and local police, and the Department of Public Works, so that if anyone needs to get in there, they can. This also means that it's a better surface. If fire trucks ever had to get in there, they can get in there now. If rescue trucks ever had to, they have access. So I think what you'll find is not only statistically in terms of the studies that have been done, but in terms of what we've done here. We've cleaned it up, we've been hauling trash out of there, we've made it so that it's more easily accessible to the emergency personnel, and there are more eyes out there, and people will report problems if something goes on, and they'll be addressed. So it's definitely an enhancement to the community. When Northampton first decided they wanted to, or when there was a group of people in Northampton that first wanted to put that initial piece of trail that started at the Connecticut River and went to Amherst, there were so many people in the area that fought it bitterly. No, 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 we don't want that. It'll ruin our property values, whatever. Finally, after years, enough people supported it that that first section was completed. And within another year or two after that, so many people said, wow, this is unbelievable. They saw property values go up. They saw businesses opening on the trail. They saw people commuting on that. Now that network goes way past Belchertown to the east, goes almost down to Connecticut. It's become a huge network of trails, and people love it, and they can't get enough of it. People want to expand it in all directions, and we even have people who are selling real estate specifically because it is such an attractive market to be on that.
On Putney Road, you know, what are the plans for that, and how far along have they come? I know that's been in the works for a while. And do we have some, you know, some property owners there who are opposing it?
I'm not sure which piece.
From downtown along the railroad up to the bridge that goes on Putney Road.
Okay.
That's,
Well, it's all railroad property. The railroad owns all the way to the bank of the Connecticut River, and we've been talking to them about that. The railroad is in the business of making money, and they're not going to give us any particular bargains. But we're in discussions with them, and as you've probably seen if you've been paying attention to the newspaper or legislation that has passed the state last fall about trails and alternatives to roads, there's a lot of political support right now, and there's some funding out there. I don't want to say a lot, but there's some funding out there, and we're applying for that funding, or will be, so that we can hopefully acquire this piece of land from the railroad. So it is doable. The railroad has expressed openness to the idea, but it's a bureaucracy. It will take time. It's probably going to be years, and once and if we acquire the property, then actually working again with Agency of Natural Resources or whoever to get a trail that close to the edge of the water will be a challenge and probably not cheap. But just thinking about having that trail right out of the center of Brattleboro just excites me to think about it.
I will be the first to nominate you for the Brattleboro Hall of Fame if you can get the whetstone pathway in place.
Okay. I think that there's been an interesting political shift as we have made the West River Trail accessible and started talking about it. So many people have said, oh yeah, I've heard about it, or I walked that trail, really? It made it better? And there's been a real excitement that has happened from that. And I've been amazed at the interest that people have shown, the support people have brought to this. People want to come out and help us move rocks in the mud and make it be a better place for all of us, or people who have written checks, and there's a real momentum. And I feel that if we can do this 1 mile stretch from the West River to the Whetstone, that will be so much higher a profile, and people will get so much more excited about it. There will be even more of a political shift, and maybe we can do what they did in Northampton, which is once they see what this is and how incredible it is, people are going to want this trail stretched in all directions. I would love to see the Whetstone pathway be done. I don't see any reason why it couldn't. I think, again, that was a victim of over-engineering, making the cost of it be prohibitive, and also shrinking budgets, which made it less funding available. And I see that that trail could be done in increments. The first piece was done, that's great. It's a rather expensive piece, but it can be done. If we take the next piece up to Elm Street, that's not very far. Once you've done that, all right, well, you know, that's nice. It ties it into where the youth theater is. Great, people could just walk up the river to the youth theater. All right, let's take it a little further. Now we take it up to Elliott Street. Okay, I actually own a building just past Elliott Street. I would volunteer in a heartbeat to let that trail go through my front yard right along the river. Absolutely. And then you're up to, I think that's Sir Sosimo's yard that goes up around across from the William Street. Okay. We'll just take this in little bites, little piece at a time. And as this trail gets connected, and as pieces come together, and as people say, I would much rather be walking along the river than, you know, what, riding along Putney Road. There will be more political will. I think more people will find ways of funding that, and we just take it in bites that we can chew off, and this will be a growing network of trails that everyone can take advantage of, and we can get more and more away from our cars.
I was asked to ask one of the questions. I think the answer is the same. The stretch of the trail from the Whetstone pub or the Whetstone Brewery down to the old railroad bridge. Same answer as the stretch from there up north. It's all railroad property.
Not quite. So the piece south is a little different. The town holds the piece that starts at Route 119 south down to the gas company. They are 100% in support of this, everyone I've talked to. The next piece is owned by Merrill Gas. They are an ongoing business, and I at one point inquired about the possibility of, could we pass through their land? And I was told that since 9/11, they have all kinds of requirements of how close the public can get to gas and oil storage tanks. So they cannot let the general public anywhere near that. This is federal requirements maybe, but definitely security requirements that prevent that. The design of the bridge that is coming over from New Hampshire is going to come directly over where their tanks are now. And it has been made very clear to me that the government will not permit propane and oil tanks underneath a major connection artery. So the state will take that land when it comes time. And so from the gas company south, that is all railroad land that the town of Brattleboro already has the rights to access to get down to work on the sewage treatment plant. So the town already has the rights to that land. So there's just one keystone missing there, which is the gas company, and unless they decide to close and go away, which I doubt, there's nothing that's going to happen there until the state takes the land for the bridge. When that happens, we are wide open. There's nothing else we have to do. It'll all fall into place, and so we're just waiting that piece out. The question was about how about on down towards Vermont Yankee and the hydro plant down there. As part of the Windham County study that I mentioned earlier that was done in 2001, or completed in 2001, they talked about the possibility of running a trail all the way down to the Massachusetts border along the railway. So it's sort of on paper, I don't know, that's a little farther out on the network, but could happen before too long, I hope. Thank you.